Hello, and welcome to Parent Like a Professional. Today, we are going to be talking about questions that parents have sent in regarding some problem behaviors they've been having. I am Monica Yanokita, and I'm here with Dr. Eric Meyer and Marquis Helms.
Hello, everyone. We're excited about today's broadcast. Like Monica was saying, we have a few parents that have sent in some questions and are seeking out advice. As always, we want to give suggestions. We can't really give recommendations because we're not familiar with, your children, and we haven't done any type of assessment. And really, the way that it starts when we're giving recommendations is we conduct assessments and identify what the needs are before we make recommendations. But in this case, what we're going to try to do is give suggestions the best that we can with the information that's been provided by these parents. So, Marquis, do you want to read the first question that mother and father number one had?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a parent submit a sort of a scenario question for us. So she has a 7-year-old named Alex, and recently she expresses that she's been struggling with his defiant behavior. Whenever she asks him to do something simple, like cleaning up his toys or getting ready for bed, Alex responds with outright refusal or tantrums. Many parents feel this. Sarah feels frustrated and unsure how to handle it. One evening, she said she asked Alex to tidy up his toys before bedtime, and instead of complying, he threw a tantrum, shouting, "I don't want to." She feels her patience is wearing thin as she tries to reason with him to just clean up his toys, but nothing seems to work. She is worried if she gives in, it's going to be bad, but if she reacts too harshly, it's going to be bad. So she's looking for some information and advice.
Sure. I just have a couple questions. I'm assuming you're giving us all the information that's been relayed by Sarah, the mother. So, what is Sarah doing? What is mom doing after the tantrum or the refusal? Did she say by any chance? Or
So
is that information that was left out?
here she expresses that when she says given or reason. So I imagine in those moments that she's providing attention and justification and trying to
Mhm.
talk him through it.
So we're going to make some assumptions here. Obviously, we don't know enough in terms of what's actually happening in the home setting, but let's just make the assumption that Sarah, mom, is kind of giving in. And so when Alex is throwing a tantrum or he completely refuses or engages in what she's calling defiant behavior, she's not following through. So she's not making him clean up the toys. So let's go with that assumption. Monica Yanokita, do you want to go ahead and start and tell us a little bit about what you would recommend or suggest in a situation where somebody's throwing a tantrum when asked to do something and then the parent is backtracking? Like, what would you call the tantrum? Is that an effective form of communication? Would we say that's functional communication?
Yes, because it seems like he's probably getting what he wants out of it, which is to not have to clean up the toys or to get out of it or to escape it.
Mhm.
So it seems like it's really working for him. It's just not working for mom so much.
Yeah.
Um, so like I immediately start to think about like the antecedents, behavior, and consequences, or what we call the ABCs, and trying to figure out, okay, what's going on before the behavior happens. It's most likely, it sounds like he's doing something he enjoys or something he likes. So he's watching TV, he's playing with his toys. Then the request is made to clean up, and then he's engaging in that behavior, which is the B. So that is, the tantrum. And then it seems like the consequence, from what it sounds like from the scenario, she's talking to him and trying to talk him through it, but he's probably not having to clean up those toys, or bedtime is getting delayed and delayed. So he's definitely not having to go to bed right then. Eventually, probably he goes to bed, but
Mhm.
it's taking quite a long time. So it does seem like those are the basic ABCs.
Yeah. Yeah. So I completely agree with what your analysis is here of the situation. Um, yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people say like, "Hey, we want to teach children how to communicate," and what we don't realize is what we're really trying to say is we want to teach our children how to communicate appropriately so that they can live a very happy life in the future. And so when somebody's asked to do something, in this case, when Sarah's asking, her son Alex to clean up, um, he's communicating, I think, in a very well fashioned, where he's throwing a tantrum and he's communicating by saying that he doesn't want to do it. And so by mom not following through, she's strengthening or reinforcing his mode of communication, the way that he communicates. And it sounds like mom is saying, like, hey, what do I do about this? Like, I don't like this type of communication. I don't like my son, throwing tantrums. Obviously, it's not healthy, to have this type of relationship, mother-son or parent-son relationship where, the son is throwing a tantrum. And of course, it's going to cause problems in the future, whether it's at home or at school or with other relationships. So it's definitely something that we would want to address as soon as possible. So Monica, you mentioned, and the assumption we're making is mom doesn't follow through. So, a couple of things that I'm thinking of, when mom is asking, I mean, I think we would both, suggest like, hey, if you ask him to do something, you have to follow through. You have to be prepared to follow through. So if you're tired, it's the end of the day, you're just not feeling it, you're probably better off not making the request. That would be probably one of my first suggestions. Monica, hop onto that. What else would you suggest?
Well, my other big suggestions are some of the requests, like going to bed, is going to be necessary for the end of the day. So trying to do some antecedent manipulations first, which is trying to set up the situation so that hopefully it'll be a little bit easier of a transition. So a 7-year-old, my guess is that they have some understanding of before, first this, then this, and then also using transition. So like letting them know like, hey, in a couple of minutes, we're going to wrap this up. We're trying to transition from a highly preferred activity to maybe a more neutral activity is another suggestion. So like if they're playing with their toys or they're watching TV, that is probably not the super best time to give a really high demand, which is clean up or go to bed. So trying to transition maybe to go, we're in 5 minutes, we're going to go read a book together, or we're going to go do something that's maybe a little bit more neutral, but maybe something more interactive with the parent, because most kids at 7 they're still really seeking that attention from their parents a lot. So trying to transition, I think, would be good. And then the other idea is
also, by the way, I love that, having that. But first of all, antecedent, when we talk about antecedent manipulation, Monica's referring to everything that happens before the behavior, before the tantrum, before the child responding in a compliant fashion. So, the idea that, we're going to say first, we're going to do this, then we're going to do that. These are all considered antecedent manipulations. I love the idea of moving from, a highly preferred to something that is maybe not as highly preferred, but it's not non-preferred. Yeah. It's not a non-preferred activity. So I love the idea of like, we're going to transition to reading a book in bed, instead of, adding all these like non-preferred requests. Clean up your toys, it's time to go to bed. And then, we're just kind of setting up the occasion for a tantrum, right?
Yeah. And I also heard in that scenario, she had said that cleaning up toys was hard, and then also going to bed was hard. And then she said, and towards the end, she said, then I asked her to clean up before bed. And it's like, oh, that's just asking for it. You're like a double whammy of tough things. So the antecedent manipulation, transitioning to a more neutral activity. And then the other thing is, I think that trying to show the kid before you ask them, hey, in a few minutes, we're going to start wrapping up and going to bed. Once we get into bed, or once we finish cleaning the toys, this is what you're going to get. So thinking of what you can give them and explain that situation to them before, I think can be really helpful and really powerful, because then at least you have something to say too. Be like, don't forget, when I ask you to do this, you're going to get this afterwards. And that's just like the first step. Obviously, we have to wean that, and you're not going to do that forever, but just to kind of try to get around those tantrums and get them to realize that, hey, if I just do this, I'm going to get something really great. It's not all doom and gloom when my parents ask me to clean up.
Yeah. And I think, some of the things that we need to think about too, parents are going to say, well, what if that doesn't work? What if we ask them to do that and we, suggest that we're going to read a book or do something that's, neutral or, not as preferred, but somewhat preferred? What if that doesn't work? Well, you need to be prepared to help, model, insist, that your son or daughter helps clean up. So, one of those things, like I said earlier, is if you're tired, it's the end of the day and you don't think you can do that, then it's probably better to just do the transition without cleaning up. But at some point, you're going to have to address it. And I would highly recommend if, you have another parent that could assist you, I would also have them there, but you would follow through, make sure that they start cleaning up, even if you have to use hand over hand guidance or prompting. But you have to follow through, and maybe you clean up, there's 10 toys out, maybe you put 7 of those toys away and you only have them clean up 3. And then maybe next time it's 5 and 5, and then 7 and 3. Next time they're cleaning everything up. But you're going to need to follow through and not allow the tantrum to communicate that they're not going to do it.
Some other thoughts and suggestions for kind of the consequence side of things is one kind of positive, what may feel positive as a parent direction is, Eric talked about putting 7 of the toys away for them, and then they put the last one away. But you also could be like, okay, which one toy are you going to save and not put away? Guess what? How exciting is that? You get to not put away one toy and you get to take it with you into the bathroom to brush your teeth, but everything else goes away. And make it fun. It puts you in a positive space. And I also think that it's very important. This mom seems to be struggling with the back and forth banter, and many parents struggle with that. I'm giving you permission to not do that. When Eric says follow through, and when we say follow through, it does not mean that you have to have that back and forth banter. It is a very powerful experience. We've all been through it. When your parent says, pick up the toy, and then nothing. And then a couple minutes later, like, yeah, we can definitely do what you're saying, but you got to pick up that toy. That is a very meaningful experience. So I give you permission. You don't have to banter. You don't have to go back and forth.
I love it. I love those suggestions. These are strategies that we would highly recommend you try at home. So let us know if you are experiencing something very similar with your children. Please let us know. Write in, and we'd love to help you address it. So yeah, thank you, Morky and Monica.
And thanks, Sarah, for submitting that question. We appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Sarah. And best of luck. Let us know how it works. Give us some information on the second family.
Sure thing. So David is a single father. He has 2 teenage daughters. Boy, are teenagers fun, which we know Dr. Meyer can relate to. They are Emily and Mia. Lately, David has been grappling with her excessive use of social media. And despite his attempts to set limits and encourage healthier habits, Mia spends hours glued to her phone, scrolling various apps, engaging in online activities. He worries about the negative impact. He worries about how to set effective boundaries for this. And he says that he has had some conversations with her about this, but that she's very like, this is how I am with my friends. I'm just hanging out with my friends. This is normal. So he's torn between inflicting stricter rules. So in general, he was just like some advice on that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things that we are as parents now dealing with that we didn't really experience as children. I mean, we didn't have the social media and all the different platforms when we were younger. It really is the major mode of communication amongst not just teenagers, but also adults. And it's almost an addiction. And some people say it is an addiction where people have a very difficult time limiting the amount of use, whether they're teenagers or adults, using their social media. So we've talked about in the past, like with your children, when we start and they're young, before they hit 3, we're teachers and instructors. At about 3 years of age, we become more directors. We're telling them what they can or can't do. But by the time they become preteens or teenagers, our role as a parent starts to transition to more of a coach, or what I would recommend a coaching style. So, what are the pros and cons of doing A, B, and C? What are the cons of being on social media for hours and hours? What are the negative effects? Those are things we would definitely want to share with our children and things that I've done with our teenagers. I think what I've seen, what's very common and what's been reported by other parents is they'll tell their teenagers to get off social media, but there's no other alternative. And I think we have to be very careful with that. So if you're going to say you're not allowed to use social media, what are the other options? What are the other options? So there's got to be some other options. Things that we've done in the past, things that have really worked for us so that I'm not the bad guy, is that we just turn off the Wi-Fi. Yes, there are situations where if they're on their phone, they can use their cellular, but we turn off the Wi-Fi. The cellular is not as strong in the home setting, so that works for us. But at the same time, we also set rules that a couple of hours before bedtime, their cell phones, they have to give them up. And the other options is they can spend time either with the family, they can watch TV with us, we can do homework, whatever it might be. Usually it's got to be more of a preferred time, but we've set those boundaries long ago, which made it a lot easier. Once they're teenagers and they're kind of settled in with what they're used to, it makes it a little more challenging. But Monica, I'd love to hear from you in terms of what your thoughts are in regards to the social media.
Well, I mean, I think that setting those boundaries, but also like consistency, like on a daily basis. So it's like you said, like the phones get plugged in a certain spot, maybe, so they don't go in their room. Those kinds of things are really helpful, because once they're set, it makes it easier to enforce. And so you're not making those decisions back and forth every day, because those are like all the time. Those decisions are just become a lot. But I think it's the other thing is there's the really good documentary. It was out a while ago, The Social Dilemma. I think is a really great, especially for teenagers to watch if they haven't already, to sit down and watch that, because it very clearly lays out what are some of the, pros and cons to social media and to, our ever increasing AI world and all that. This one was kind of done a while ago, but it just talks about the effects of social media. And I just think it's really important to have that knowledge and maybe not come from mom and dad. That I think is pretty helpful. But I mean, and also, what else are they doing outside of their time? Like, they do need to have time to socialize with their friends. That's really important for that age. So are there other opportunities, like Eric said, like, are they doing sports? Are they doing other things to engage with their peers, rather than just coming home and being, on devices? So giving them other outlets is necessary. You can't just take it away and not give anything else.
Yeah, and which brings us back to sort of attempting to analyze the function of the behavior. And this is a very complex behavior to sort of try to piece out the function, but there are definitely components of like access and tangible, like hold the phone, play with the games on the phone. And there's probably a big attention component as well. Chat with your friends, seeing what your friends are doing online. And that's very like reinforcing it, to the point where they can't get off of it, right? It's a very strong reinforcer. So when Dr. Meyer and Monica are mentioning, like, you have to have other activities for them to do, you have to find a competing reinforcer. You have to find something that is going to be just as motivating and exciting, so that they're not going to feel like they're being dragged away from their social media to do something that they don't want to do either. So maybe doing a preference assessment, asking them, what are some other things that you're interested in? What are some activities that we could do? Don't just make it up for them, but kind of get their input a little bit.
Yeah. And then also just teaching them how to set limits for themselves. I mean, everything that we do, we have to have limits on, whether we like it or don't like it. There's limits, and there's time limits and restraints on everything. So teaching them how to use, because eventually they'll be in college or living on their own soon. So if you don't teach them how to kind of help themselves get to those limits, it's just, as soon as they're out of your house, they're going to be, doing some of those things too. And it's not going to be great for them if they're just super hyper focused and engaged in those activities. So
Very good.
tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one. A lot of parents struggle with it, David. Thanks so much for submitting the question, because I think a lot of parents are going to really relate to it and want to hear the same information. So thanks so much.
Okay. So we have Stephanie Amari joining us. She's a board certified behavior analyst, and she's going to join us for this next situation where mom is asking questions about her son, Daniel. Maybe Mark, you can tell us a little more about what's going on.
Sure. So, Mom Lisa, thanks so much for submitting your question. And her son, Daniel, he is 5 years old. He is also the youngest. He's been displaying aggressive behavior, specifically towards his siblings, often hitting and pushing them when he doesn't get his way. Lisa is deeply concerned about his behavior and worries about the safety of his brothers and sisters. She's tried talking to him about using his words to express his feelings instead of resorting to violence, but he doesn't seem to understand or listen. So she is looking for some advice and help.
Okay, so what we're hearing here, Mom, Lisa, Daniel has a very effective way of communicating what his wants and needs are. And it's not appropriate, or it's not something that you're comfortable with. And so we need to come up with some suggestions on how you can manage the situation where we can change what he's doing now to a different mode of communication that's more appropriate. So, Stephanie Amari, Monica Yanosuga,
Yeah, so
suggestions.
one of my questions would be is like, what are the siblings doing after he engages in the behavior? So I would look at, are they giving him what he wants? Because it sounds kind of like it's when he doesn't get his way, but that would be my other question. I don't know what not getting his way means. So is it, I want to watch TV, I want the show. It could, they have a toy that I want, they get to go do something that I can't. But then I'd want to know what the siblings are doing in response to, because it sounds like mom is talking to him about using his words and expressing his feelings. But that could be way after the event happened. So really just I would want to know more about what the siblings are doing in response to his behavior.
I think those are good questions, Stephanie. We have to make assumptions. What we said earlier is that we really can't give recommendations when we have like a little piece of what's going on. Typically, we conduct assessments that give us detailed information on, the needs of an individual. But here, we're taking in some questions that families have without having all the information. So we have to make some assumptions, right? What we do know is that, mom has this challenge. Most likely the assumption is that this challenge is not a one-time thing. It's been happening over the course of time. That's why she's bringing it to us. And from what we know about human behavior continues when it's reinforced. And when it's not reinforced, it does not continue. So if he is pushing and shoving because he wants something, I'm going to make the assumption, or we should make the assumption, that he's getting what he wants. He's accomplishing, what he's trying to get or what he wants with the behaviors that mom is concerned about. So, and you made a good point, Stephanie. Mom is talking to him about this after the fact, but it's not effective, this discussion, because she's coming to us for suggestions to help figure out what she can do differently so that this stops, and he's using a more appropriate way of communicating his wants and needs. So let's make those assumptions that she's not, that he's getting what he wants, and that the conversation she's having is after the fact, but it's just not changing what's happening in the home setting.
Let's also make the assumption, because I think a lot of parents out there are imagining how their own kids behave in their household, that when these interactions are happening with the siblings, that it's probably a lot of attention and comments like, hey, like, don't touch me. Like, why you gotta be like that? And there's probably some back and forth interaction between him and his siblings after he's being aggressive or while he's being aggressive.
Okay, so suggestion, Stephanie Amari.
I would, depending on maybe the age of the siblings, if they're a little bit older and maybe have a little bit more of an understanding of helping the brother at that time, maybe to use his words. So if mom's not in the room and the behavior's happening, that maybe if the sibling's a little bit older, they could help or prompt Daniel to say my turn, or can I have it, or whatever would be the easiest thing for him to say in that moment. And then, if they could like reinforce that behavior by maybe giving him a turn, if that's something that's possible with the toy that they have, only with something that he's allowed to
Let's make the
have.
assumption that the siblings are not older.
So
'Cause I think
younger
if they were
siblings,
older-
maybe?
They are older. She
Okay.
does say that Daniel is the youngest.
Oh, he's
Okay.
the youngest. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But youngest could mean that they're just six or
right. Yeah.
not really not able to do that too.
Yeah.
I was going to suggest trying to set up it. Let's just say the siblings, maybe they are older, but doesn't mean they're like, capable to really help that much. I mean, trying to set up similar situations with mom, to try to help teach him those words that he can use and those more appropriate words, and having him almost like rehearse them in situations where she can model for him and
Mhm.
have him engage in the appropriate behavior before the hitting or other behavior happens, would also be maybe a suggestion, because it
Yeah.
sounds like maybe he does have, vocal verbal like communication, but he's just not using it. Or if he's using it, also maybe the siblings aren't listening to that and they're only listening or giving in
Mhm.
once the aggression or the, other behavior is happening. So
Yeah,
it's kind
that's
of
a
a
very good point.
Yeah.
He might in the past have attempted to use a vocal verbal mode of communication where he's using his words, and it's not reinforced. So if the siblings are older and they're like, nope, you can't have this, or they take something away, and he says, please give that back, or give it back, or I was playing with it, or I want to play with it, and they ignore him, then he's going to go to the next set of behaviors that will allow him access to what he wants, right? And it's probably
Yeah.
the tantrum or the hitting or whatnot. I would suggest mom getting right in the middle, like, taking some time where, hey, I think you should, play with your kids if you're not already doing so, sit there, and then when the situation comes up, or maybe even set up an opportunity for a situation to come up before he hits, like as you see it coming where you want something that somebody else has, work on having him use his words, but making sure that the older siblings are following through and reinforcing that. I think that mom's going to have to be right there. So
Yeah.
we can do a lot of prep, and role play, but mom's also going to have to be right there during that time where they're playing, at least for part of the time, so that she can, catch it while it's happening. I think that's really, and a lot of times I get it, parents are busy, they're doing what they need to do, their daily tasks. But, one of the daily tasks, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour, or if they can make some time to sit with their kids and kind of get into the mix, I think that, that would be very important. I think it would be pretty effective if they can be right there and model what is expected right when it happens.
Yeah.
Mhm. And there's going to be times where even with all that modeling and teaching with all of the kids, because it might not just be Daniel that needs the teaching, that the problem's not going to be solved. And so it might be beneficial to teach, like if it just gets to a point where you can't handle it and you feel like you're going to be aggressive, you go find the adult and you ask for help.
Mhm.
Go
100%.
find the nearest person and just be like, this is what's happening to me, and then go and help problem solve. And maybe that's what you fade to after you spend a lot of time modeling is, okay, well, I'm over here, if you need my help, ask me, and keep moving farther and farther away. But that's a very appropriate thing, and it would be very useful in the school setting, field trips with other adults as well.
Love it. Agreed.
I agree
So
with that.
if you have any comments or questions, please reach out to us. If you have some of the some challenges that are similar or even different, please reach out to us. We'd like to help you address them. We appreciate you guys following us. We look forward to seeing you on another PLP presentation. Stephanie, Monica, Marquis, thank you. We appreciate your expertise and your experience, and we will see you soon. Take care.